Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One to One. Each week, we address issues of timely and timeless concern with newsmakers and the journalists who report on them, with artists, writers, scientists, educators, social scientists, activists, government leaders. We speak with each one to one. The current recession has made it difficult for lots of Americans to find and hold on to work, from those who are college educated and highly skilled to those who have little education and few or no job skills. What's more, the economy poses what can appear to be insurmountable obstacles to poor women who are immigrants, single mothers, displaced homemakers, downsized workers, or the victims of domestic violence. After transcending great personal losses of her own, today's guest, Carmela Marone, went back to college and became motivated to help transform the lives of other women. She directs the Women and Work program of Queens College, which over the last 12 years has not only helped more than 1,600 low-income women to find jobs, but has given them the tools they need to rebuild their lives. Welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us about the series of personal setbacks that brought you first to Queens College and then to the Women and Work program.
Well, my setbacks began, actually I was going along quite nicely and received a diagnosis of cancer and was told, you will have the surgery in a few weeks and months, you will be better and you will be able to move your life back on to where it was going. And in my life, I was leading a very successful corporate life, of course, with all the perks that go with that.
What kind of work were you doing?
I was managing 5 southeastern states sales force, and that was geared to selling spas, memberships, and the clothing, and all of the goods that go with that.
Okay.
And especially at that time, that was certainly a very viable industry, so they wanted to encourage the spread of that industry. So when I was diagnosed, it was a bitter pill to swallow. I had had a lot of cancer in my family. I'd known what the disease could do. I had just lost my maternal grandmother 6 months earlier to the same disease, so my family had struggled with that. Now I had the same cancer. I had the surgery, I did everything I was supposed to, and instead of getting better, I actually got worse. Within 18 months, I had 3 major surgeries, actually whittled down to 83 pounds on a 5'6" frame, lost my home, ended a 16-year marriage, and had to basically give up caring for my daughter, who was a young teenager at the time, and I asked my mother to come and take her back to New York. I was living in Georgia at the time. And she did that. And of course, my family wanted to take me home. They wanted to take care of me. And I decided they had already been through so much. I wanted to do something else instead. So I chose to live a year by myself out in the North Georgia mountains, keep a journal, try to think about where my life had been and where it was going, if I would have a life at all. And my mom and I agreed that we would give it 1 year. At the end of 1 year, I was able to walk out of that situation, call my mom, and say, please come and get me. Of course, my entire family was only too happy to do that. And I came back to New York, and I realized that I was going to have to start over with nothing. So back into that little bedroom that was once mine in Queens, in my mom's apartment, back to the school that had once welcomed me in the 1960s, and to which I left because I wanted to see the world, so I went off to work for Pan American World.
So back to Queens College.
Back to Queens College.
Okay.
And while there, I completed 2 undergraduate degrees, one in women's studies, one in sociology, a master's in applied social research. And while I was doing that, the opportunity came up to have some space in a women's center. And I wanted desperately to go, because I wanted to work in the community. I knew that I wanted to do something for other women. What I wanted to share with them was the idea that they could rebuild their lives. Because even though my life was still pretty tattered, I knew that it was going on the right track again. I knew that it was going to go somewhere, that this was my goal. So I got the space there, and we had 7 wooden folding chairs and borrowed computers from the Ford Foundation. And we welcomed the first women to women in work after concluding about 18 months of pure research on job training
You said how many
programs.
women were there?
7.
7. Wow.
Seven
Wow.
women on wooden folding chairs. And we were going to do 2 days a week for 6 weeks. Well, it didn't take but 4 weeks to figure out that that just wasn't going to do, because one of the things that I quickly learned to do was to listen to the stories of the women, to hear what they were saying were their problems, and to start to put my ideas aside to help build this framework of a new model, of a new way of thinking. And I realized what all the job training programs, those traditional job training programs, were lacking. And the beginnings, the very beginnings of women in work started to take shape.
Now, where did these women come from?
Those women came from the surrounding area, which was Bayside, Queens.
Okay.
And so, of course, the first women to come to Women in Work were predominantly white women who had, had worked, but lacked the skills to get back into the workforce, and they wanted some skills. And we didn't really advertise because we were just trying to learn what was going on with getting back into the workforce. I was looking at the barriers to the workplace. I was looking about women who were doing jobs and they weren't being paid properly for them. So they were doing the jobs of supervisors but not getting the supervisors' pay. And we put one little line in a newspaper, and then 200 women showed up on our doorstep. And we realized instantly, I knew that we had an issue that needed to be addressed.
Now, and how did you bill yourselves?
Well, when I first had the local neighborhood newspapers who decided to put those little few lines in the paper for them, we said, this is a training program for women who want to enter the workforce, who need some computer skills and some help with writing.
Okay.
So I didn't really have a vision yet of anything grand. It was, my goal was simply to get women into the workplace. I thought entry-level jobs, but better entry-level jobs.
Right.
But
So
that quickly fell by the wayside, because when the women did show up on our doorstep, they were poor women.
Right.
They were women from domestic violence shelters, had read those 2 little sentences and sent women to us. And the program immediately, within the first year of its life, started to shift gears as the women coming to it shaped what it would become.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that has continued and evolved over all these years.
Now, what kinds of resources did you have other than the folding chairs and the space?
Actually, we had no resources. We had no money. Dr. Eisenstein, who's at Queens College, knew somebody at the Ford Foundation, and they were getting rid of some computers, and they said, if you will come and get them, you can have them. So we borrowed a truck, and friends and myself went and picked them up off the loading dock at the Ford Foundation and brought them back to Bayside, Queens. And then the then provost of Queens College, actually paid to have operating systems put on them and programs put on them. And that's how we began.
Teaching them English skills and computer skills, obviously.
English skills and computer skills, writing skills, and everybody was a volunteer. Nobody was getting paid because we had no money to pay anyone. And after the first program ran and completed, and the second program, at the end of the first year, we already had 12 women coming, and then 24. I asked people, I said, do you want to stay with this? Because I think that this is something that we can turn into something wonderful, and there's such a great need. How do you feel about this? And they signed on, and in fact, the teachers in the program today are graduates of Women in Work that started as those first volunteers.
Now, who qualifies for the program?
Well, to qualify for the program, you have to do a couple of different things. You have to have a GED or a high school diploma. You do have to be legally authorized to work inside the United States. And you have to not be able to pay for these services anywhere else. So this program is for poor women, and for women without resources. And sometimes women have a household income where it looks like, well, they have money, but they may be deprived access to those funds. So it's something that we would like to talk through with them to determine those needs.
Now, do you get more applicants than you can accommodate? And if so, how do you choose?
I'm sorry to say that we get way more applicants than we can accommodate, even though we have steadily grown, with time. Today we service over 500 women annually through the various programs that
In the
we
course
operate.
of a in the course of a year.
In the course of a year.
Okay.
But on average, we field about 975 phone calls from people asking for our assistance. At our open houses, we regularly pre-screen and turn away between 250 and 300 people. Now, that's a lot of women. And what we do with those women, rather than to just say no, is to find out what is their story, and then we try to refer them to other agencies or organizations. One of the things that Women in Work prides itself on is that we don't just walk away. We consider the life circumstances of every woman, whether she's on the phone, at our door for assistance, or in our program in one of our community of women.
Now, you were talking about, you have the three main components to the program.
Yes.
Women Rising, Stepping Stones, and the post-program program.
That's
so tell me about those.
Women Rising is the 15-week day program, and it starts at 8:45 in the morning and runs until 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Is that every day?
Every day.
5 days a week?
5 days a week. We actually send them out 1 day a week to an internship at a friendly, what we determine are a friendly company. In other words, a friendly company would be one that we know are advancing their work skills and respecting them as if they were already a worker there. We are very bound to getting surveys every week from both our participants and from host sites so that we can understand both how the woman says she's being treated and how the site says she's being treated.
So 1 day is an internship?
1 day is an internship.
Okay.
And what we want to do is make sure that those skills that we're teaching in the classroom are practically applied. Also what the internship provides is, if a problem arises, then we have time to work with that woman to ameliorate that problem before she goes into the paid workforce and finds herself unemployed because of that inability.
Right.
So.
Now hold that thought, and we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with more with Carmela Marone, Director of the Women and Work Program of Queens College, after the following message.
How many trees in the cookie jar? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life.
Go Dad! Go Dad!
Take time to be a dad today.
Welcome back to One to One. I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York, and I'm talking with Carmela Marone, Director of the Women and Work Program at Queens College. Now, we were talking about the Women Rising program. In addition to that 1 day that the women do an internship, what's the curriculum like for the other 4 days?
The curriculum is actually very broad, and there are days that are specifically dedicated to computer classes, to English skills, both in the reading comprehension, verbal skills, and writing skills. We have a special ESL class for our women where English is not their first language. We do that in-house. We have 1 day that is totally dedicated to a virtual company that we run called Women in Work, Inc., and the women take their advanced learning seminars. Those are the only classes that are taught not by our the regular Women in Work teachers, but by our assistant director, who fortunately for us is a Phi Beta Kappa Summa Cum Laude graduate of Queens College and is also a sociologist.
What do you find are the main, so you have obviously English classes and math classes,
right,
and the computer skills. What do you find are the main obstacles that are keeping these women from getting into the workforce or staying in it?
Those main obstacles are actually addressed in the curriculum, because what those main obstacles are about a woman's inability to navigate a very complicated social system and a very complicated workforce. And so the women who come into Women in Work have something that lack something that a lot of other women do have, that are doing that with greater ease, and that's social capital. And in Women in Work, one of the things that we strive to, besides learning about all the wonderful skills that you need to have in the workforce, we know that one of the things that we have to teach women is that life is a negotiation, and they have to be great negotiators. In order to do that, they have to know how to prioritize and how to determine when something is valuable to them, how is it valuable to them, and how can they get that. One of the things we really earn early on in the program is the women's trust. And Women in Work is unique in so many ways, because to go back to what you were saying about programming, it's not just about going through 15 weeks of a program or the evening program or the post program. It's about knowing that once you are in this program, you are part of a community of women that is yours forever. You can access it as much or as little as you want. Now, in the program, in the community, we are already beginning to look at what they have done in their lives. How does that translate into jobs? What kind of job skills? Where do they really want to go? If we said to them, you could do anything, what would you like to do? Sometimes they've heard that question for the very first time. And when we say to them, guess what? Anything is possible. It's not just simply graduating and getting a job, but we really want to understand what is innovative about the work that we're doing is understanding that we are partners. We have signed a contract. Participants and Women in Work are partners. And the goal is to understand not a cookie cutter mold, but an individual woman, and how we can work with her, not just today for 15 weeks, but maybe for 2 years or 5 years to get her to where she wants to go.
You talk about social capital. Yes. I would imagine that part of that is about attitudes towards work, things that they may not know that in addition to how to dress or how to deal with a supervisor, that when the supervisor tells you I want this done, you don't say, well, I don't want to do that, or that's your opinion, and I'm not going to do it. Those kinds of things.
Those are critical issues. One of the first things we do on the intake are assess self-esteem, first of all. And then throughout the program, they're taking classes in self-esteem, conflict resolution. So all of these elements are there. But remember that Women in Work is a highly structured, multi-tiered program, and that there are results that are going to happen. So in other words, if you don't show up on time at Women in Work, you're locked out of the classroom. You have to go to the office. You have to explain why you were late. And what we do is we explain to the women, why do most women lose their jobs? Well, they're just 5 minutes late. Well, we take that 5 minutes, we apply an hourly wage to that, and we extend it out for a full year. And explain to me how you're going to tell an employer that this is justified.
Right.
So we're looking at the cause and effect and the action and the reaction, and we're saying to them, if you don't want these things to happen, then you have to be accountable.
Now, this is basically a full-time program. How do they support themselves when they're in the program?
We've seen women do some extraordinary things. Many of the women in the program are on services, social services, some are on unemployment. The first thing we do is assess when they come in, and we ask them, can you survive for the next 15 weeks? That's the first thing. Some are sleeping on couches of friends, with relatives. They're doing all sorts of extreme things. We have a food pantry at Women in Work. We have a clothing closet at Women in Work, because maybe women are choosing between the MTA ticket and having lunch. So we keep peanut butter and jelly at Women in Work with loaves of bread. We will do whatever it takes to help those women. And the first thing we'll do is determine if they're entitled to services that they aren't receiving.
And try to hook them up with those.
Absolutely.
Right.
One of our great assets is we ally with about 175 organizations, but with 25 to 30 that we work intimately. And when a woman has a problem and we refer her to an agency, instead of just saying, okay, check that off, job done, we then speak to her, how is it going? We'll speak to the agency, what's happening. We'll pursue that until it reaches, we're assured that the woman is receiving the services she should be receiving and that that is going where it needs to go. If not, we'll step in and see what else we can do.
So now all of these women come in having either a GED or a high school diploma. So
Correct.
we got that. So what's your goal for them at the end of the 15 weeks?
At the end of the 15 weeks, my goal is that they would have reached the goals that they wrote down on their way through the program. Now, what they do is they write their goals about a third of the way through the program. Then we ask them to readjust those goals about midway through the program because they begin to think that something more may be possible. Remember, they've spent time on the Queens College campus. They've had learning days. They've had tours. They've been spoken to by the adult continuing education people, by the ACE program for people over 26 who want to come back into the college. So for some now, vocational training or a college education is looking like this may even be possible. Okay? When we began this program, remember, that wasn't on our screen. Now, 10% of our population has gone on to higher education, vocational training, or certificates training of some sort. We have 2 women who now hold master's degrees that are paid for by the companies that we put them to work at.
Wow.
So we are very excited about that. So what are my goals? My goals are that they are reaching their goals.
Okay.
And that they are better equipped to navigate a complex system independently, even though we'll be their backup. We're their social network. We're never going to go away. So whether it's 6 months out or 5 years out, they can pick up that phone and say, I need you. Can I come and talk? And the answer is always yes.
Now, do you assist them in looking for jobs and finding jobs?
Yes, absolutely. We actually have them determine what jobs and what areas they'll be looking in prior to graduation. And then we set that up as part of their computer training because we find that it is more effective for them to go online directly to companies and fill out the applications online and to put them in there. In addition to that, we have a great network system in operation. Every successful Woman in Work graduate is an ambassador for this program. And I mean that in the literal sense. So wherever she works, she's our ambassador. She keeps her eyes open and her ears open for job opportunities. Anytime there's any movement in a company, we're her first phone call. One of the only training programs that I'm aware of that when we send a woman out on an interview, she goes out with a letter from us that says, if you will hire our candidate, we will provide for you 2 years of free service to assist our candidate in any way that you deem necessary. So it's almost like getting an employee guarantee.
Right.
So we feel fairly confident.
Now, in addition to the Women Rising, you also have the Stepping Stones program, which is an evening program.
Correct.
And you have the Post program,
Correct.
which is for people who've been through it. We're not going to have time to talk about those. But tell me about how successful, and how do you measure success? How successful?
Well, Women in Work is extraordinarily successful, I'm happy to say. We measure success because we track women into the workplace for 2 years post-program. We have an 85% retention rate in the workforce over 3 years. We have a 91% completion rate, which is extraordinary for a program.
What kinds of jobs are we talking about?
We're talking about jobs that, this is another advantage that we have, that we're not focused on one job or one area. So our jobs span a huge array of jobs. We have people, for instance, in the funeral service. We have women in the catering industry. We have women in corporations as executive administrative assistants for major companies such as Time Warner, who is a great consumer of Women in Work graduates. Many companies like that. So what we really want to understand about what is success for women in the workforce is not getting a job, but understanding that it is a transitional process. We have to consider what that individual woman's life situation is at that moment upon graduation. And what does she hope it will be 6 months from now, in a year from now. While it is successful maybe for her to complete the program,
Right, right.
to get into post-programming so that we can continue to assist her. Maybe we're trying to move her into more secure housing or out of a violent home.
Because it's really a program not just about finding work, preparing them for work and getting them jobs, but about rebuilding their lives.
Correct. It is, if I were to define women in work, I would never define it as a job training program. I would say this is an empowerment program for women that focuses on financial stability and life management skills, so that from the inside out, they can take control of their lives. Because to have healthy families and thriving communities, we need strong individuals, and women are a big part of what makes that happen.
And we're going to have to end on that note because we're out of time. I want to thank Carmela Marone for joining me today. If you'd like more information about the Women and Work program, you can go to qc.cuny.edu/women and work. For the City University of New York and 1 to 1, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.